We turn now to the Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Democratic Senator Mark Warner. He joins us this morning from Richmond, Virginia. Senator, a lot to ask you about in regard to Iran, but I want to start first on the homeland. We had several attacks, 2 being investigated as terror incidents here at home. Do we still have this, Senator? Okay, sorry. Glad he can still hear me. The incidents here at home, including one in Virginia at Old Dominion University, the gunman had served several years in prison for trying to support ISIS. He walked into an Army ROTC class and he shot the instructor dead. He injured 2 others. How does a convicted ISIS supporter do this right under the nose of law enforcement? Whose job was it to track him?
Well, Margaret, I think the job was supposed to be the FBI. And unfortunately, under this FBI director, Kash Patel, he has fired many of the top counterterrorism folks, counterespionage folks, and he has taken, and I reported this many times, close to 1/3 of our FBI officers off doing counterterrorism or doing sex crimes and put them on immigration enforcement. I knew this was going to come back and bite us, and I believe while there may not be a direct relationship here, we know in all of the offices they've taken these FBI agents off their critical cases and put them on immigration enforcement. I think that was a mistake. I want to find out how this guy was able to still be on the loose. And we've got to get an investigation, but we've got to get an FBI that is back focused on protecting the homeland and preventing whether it be terrorist or espionage taking place.
At this point, are you aware of any credible threats to the homeland?
I have not been briefed in the last few days on an additional credible threat. But this, let's put it like this, these are the things you have to plan for if you are planning on going to war on a war of choice. This is a war of choice. And if you just go through quickly, the president said there were going to be 4 goals. Regime change, we've actually got a worse supreme leader than the previous one. And you heard the foreign minister, it doesn't sound like they're ready to move out. The uranium enrichment, it would take troops on the ground. Getting rid of the missiles, we've attributed some of those. But the crazy thing was that we didn't take the Ukrainian offer to go after, to use their drones, which are much cheaper.
I need to talk to you about...
finally, we've got the Strait of Hormuz closed.
I got to go to a break, and I'm coming back to talk to you where I don't have to cut you off. Let me just go to this break now. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return now to our conversation with Senator Mark Warner. Senator, we were talking about Iran before that break. It was a year ago that the country's intelligence leaders sat before your committee and provided testimony at the Worldwide Threats Briefing. And at that point, the testimony was, quote, "We continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. Clearly, Israel disagreed with that U.S. assessment, and they persuaded President Trump. Were those U.S. intelligence leaders wrong?
No, they were not. There was no imminent threat to the United States, and I don't believe there was even an imminent threat to Israel from Iran. Over a period of time, particularly with the ballistic missile capability, Israel would be more under threat. The decision to go to war in this case was a choice by President Trump. And as I was racing through, I won't go through the whole list again, but it was regime change, get rid of the enriched uranium, get rid of their missiles, sink the Navy. I'm not sure we have reached successful conclusion on any of those 4, particularly on the last point, the Navy. They're still have hundreds and hundreds of these speedboats that they can plant mines in the Strait of Hormuz, which they've already partially mined. And now we're in this circumstance where he's going to decide, I guess when he feels it in his bones, I think was the quote the president used. And is that the criteria when we've got literally 13 service members killed? And I got a lot of those sailors on the Ford that are home ported in Norfolk, Virginia, and waiting for him to feel right in the bones. That doesn't seem to be the right criteria.
we will get an update from those intelligence leaders before your committee later this week. We'll be watching that closely. I want to specifically ask you, though, about what happened with this deadly strike on an elementary school in Manab, Iran. Our CBS reporting is that nearly 200 people were killed, likely the result of outdated intelligence that was used for the target coordinates, according to the preliminary assessment. Secretary Heggs has said he has appointed an investigator from outside Central Command to do a full probe. From what you have been told, did the fatal error originate from within the intelligence community, or was this an issue with the military not vetting the intelligence they were given?
Margaret, we've only got preliminary assessments, and I want a thorough investigation. But what I don't want to do is jump to the conclusion whether it was CENTCOM or whether it was Defense Intelligence Agency. That's what thorough investigations are supposed to be for. Clearly, it was an American strike. I again feel a little disappointed that the president tried to deny that at first, or say it was even the Iranians. This is where what we've got. The words of the President of the United States are terribly important in moments like this. And unfortunately, President Trump uses loose language all the time, didn't ever come to the American people on this war of choice and say what our goals are. And we still don't know, other than the 4 goals he outlined. I'm not sure we're going to accomplish, but he's going to then, whenever he decides, and where I disagree with my friend Kevin Hassett is, this is having a huge economic effect. In Virginia, 2 weeks ago, gas prices were $2.81.
Yeah.
Today, they're about $3.45. I saw a farmer yesterday, his fertilizer costs have gone up 40%.
No, and we'll continue to track that. Just to put a fine point on this, though, because this was a school full of children. If a mistake like this happens, are you confident in the rest of U.S. intelligence that is continuing to be used for targeting and to inform what is happening on the ground now and the more than 50,000 service people we have committed here?
This is why we want the investigation. This school, though, was absolutely adjacent to an Iranian military base. That does not excuse what happened, but that's why, before I cast blame on whether it was the military or DIA, I want to get the facts. I think we'd all do a better job if we actually argued from facts rather than from suppositions.
Well, on the facts, the Senate failed to advance that Homeland Security funding for the 4th time yesterday. We have airline CEOs faulting Congress for not paying TSA agents. I've got video of TSA workers on food lines because they just missed their second paycheck, half paycheck last time, full paycheck this Friday. Why can't your leaders break this deadlock?
Margaret, I think we should. And what we have offered is let's pay TSA, let's pay FEMA, let's pay the National Guard, or I'm sorry, the Coast Guard, let's pay CISA. I'd even say let's pay Customs and Border Patrol. If we can't agree on ICE reforms, let's pay everybody else. With the budget that the Republicans laid out, why won't they just take yes for an answer?
Well, they say it's a whole-scale funding, not piecemeal. But,
well, if you're going to fund 95%, as we did the balance of the government, why not do the balance of DHS with the exception of ICE?
Well, we will be watching that. Senator Warner, thank you for your time this morning. We'll be right back. We go now to Texas Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who joins us from Houston. Welcome back to Face the Nation. You, in a previous life, were a Navy SEAL. So just to tap into your expertise a little bit here, when you see that President Trump is deploying a few thousand more Marines in an expeditionary unit to join the 50,000 forces we have there, what does that signal to you?
I think it signals that there's a seriousness of supporting whatever contingency operations might be needed. I don't think people should take that as a boots on the ground deployment, especially with only 5,000 troops. These type of units are they could be for evacuating American citizens out of Gulf allied countries. They could be for a number of things. So I take it as a seriousness of committing to the situation, which is exactly what is needed. If you're going to do this, which we have done, you need to see it through. That's what I would be advising the president. I'd be advising the president to take very seriously the Straits of Hormuz, This is something we practice on a yearly basis. This is why he's asked allies to come to our aid to protect it, because we practice this as an exercise yearly with 30 plus nations. So I think he's doing what's needed.
So Secretary Hegseth said earlier this month, Operation Epic Fury would have, quote, no stupid rules of engagement. 2 days later, he said, we are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be. This Friday, he said, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies. You've served in uniform. Do you have any concern that this kind of language is sending the wrong message to our troops who are bound by standards of proportionality, or that it could backfire on our troops?
No, if you fought in these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you'd be well acquainted with bad rules of engagement. You know, the kind of thing that says, look, you can't shoot unless you're shot at. What he's saying is that we are targeting Iranian military without quarter. That's what he's saying. He's making it very clear for our military, which is a clarity that our military has lacked in many of these conflicts of the past.
So even though there are no ground troops at this point, you think that this is...
I can't.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. So you don't take that as sending the wrong signal to our troops whatsoever, or that it could inflame enemies who, if there are ever ground troops or a downed air pilot, for example, that they would be mistreated?
No, absolutely not. The rules of engagement will be very clear and in place and in writing for our troops. He is saying that to the American people, right? So there's military language that our troops abide by, which will be very clear. I don't think it sends any wrong message. I think it sends exactly the right message. Again, my experience in the military, I know what that means. Okay.
The last time you were with us, we spoke about you felt the need for moral clarity. That was a phrase you used for some within your own party, specifically around anti-Semitism in this country. I want to read for you a few things that some Republican lawmakers said this week. Andy Ogles of Tennessee said, America's a product of English Christian culture. Muslims don't belong in American society. Florida's Randy Fine said, we need more Islamophobia, not less. Fear of Islam is rational. And Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama posted a picture of the 9/11 attack next to the New York City mayor at dinner, breaking his fast at Ramadan with the phrase, the enemy is inside the gates. What do you think of this language, and should Republican leaders speak up about
it? I still think it's fairly fringe. I mean, like, the truth of the matter is radical Islamism is bad, right? We've always known that. That should not be a controversial statement at all.
But that's not what they said.
There are plenty of peaceful Muslims who live among us. I realize that, but you know that's not a mainstream narrative by any stretch. I think trying to fight it internally will probably gives it a lot more air than is necessary. We've seen that to be the case. As you know, there's a Republican conflict ongoing right now over Israel and the anti-Semitism issues, and so you know one could make the argument that speaking out against it has only inflamed it. So look, I still think that's very fringe. I don't think that's certainly not the administration's position, and. Like we're going to go after radical Islam. That's why we need to fund agencies like DHS, and that's what we're going to do.
You spoke about this culture of misinformation we're living in, and you pointed to that as one of the factors in your recent primary loss. What lessons should other Republicans take from that? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm a unique Republican. You know, I've been the target of online smears and conspiracies for a very long time. And my election was basically a product of that. You know, first of all, you have about 20% of Republican voters bothering to even vote at a primary. And then you have dozens of online smears and conspiracies that people were going into the voting booth actually believing. I mean, believing that it was worth millions of dollars from insider trading. Doesn't matter how many times we thought we had debunked that, or that other people and influencers and what have not have debunked it. All of these things, people still went in believing it. And so the lesson to be learned is, look, you've got to get the truth out. You've got to try, but ultimately, this is a question for the American people. Are you going to believe everything you read online or that's sent to you in your mail? I mean, Democrats spent almost $1 million also pushing these smears on television. So Republican voters are going to the voting booth believing what a Democrat told them on TV based on a smear headline written by a liberal reporter in D.C. So that's the lesson, and it's not just for Republican politicians, it's the lesson for Republican voters.
Misinformation. Congressman, we appreciate your time today. We'll be right back. And we're joined now by a panel of experts. Jonny Gannon's former CIA operative with extensive Iran experience. Sam Vinograd is a CBS News national security contributor and was a top counterterrorism official under the Biden administration. And Kevin Book is an energy policy expert and analyst. There is a lot for you to break down for me, but Jonny, I want to start with you. You just came back from the UAE. They have taken a lot of incoming, in particular drones.
More than anybody else.
And that seems to really have been underestimated by the United States. We've seen embassies, CIA stations, U.S. posts hit. What was it like to be in the midst of that kind of warfare?
Well, look, there's a discipline to Abu Dhabi and Dubai right now. Commerce is continuing. People are still going to work. You've probably seen video of Sheikh Mohammed, the president of the UAE, in the mall, talking with civilians, greeting children. But there is no doubt that people are beginning to feel these attacks. I was on the ground in both Abu Dhabi and Dubai. After 26 years at CIA, it's my first war zone observed from a luxury hotel. But I noticed that as the week went on, I was getting edgy. There's the interceptors overhead, there's the loud booms, hotel windows shaking, and alerts going off on your phone at all hours of the day and night. So for the time being, it looks like the majority of expats are staying put.
Yeah.
But there is an exodus, and there is impact on the economies there for our partners.
Paying for our partners economically, and those partners, many of them oil producers, natural gas producers. But those mines and those drones, they're cheap, but apparently they're effective at shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, Kevin. Do you anticipate that oil prices are going to be in this 100 range? I know Iran's saying $200 barrel.
Well, look, if the Strait reopened today, it could still take weeks to bring production back on, and damaged facilities maybe months. So there's room for the price to rise as long as the Strait stays closed. And then if we look at the strategic reserve draw, the good news is that we've drawn 400 billion barrels out of the oil savings account for the industrialized world. The bad news is that we've drawn 400 million barrels out of the oil savings account for the industrialized world.
Long term, the White House says, oh, we'll buy it back when it's cheaper, right?
Well, that's the right way to do it. You buy insurance when you don't need it.
Right.
But right now we need it.
Sam, on the homeland, we had all these horrific incidents, including that 41-year-old man who drove a car with explosives into Michigan's largest synagogue. He was a naturalized U.S. citizen. Brothers were members of Hezbollah, who had recently been killed in Lebanon along with their children. We don't know yet if the attacker was involved with Hezbollah, but what do you understand about the threat picture at home?
Margaret, the diversity and volume of terrorist threats to this country has never been higher. We have a broad range of threat actors in play. Individuals inspired and directed by countries like Iran, by foreign terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and ISIS, and individuals motivated by domestic political grievances and racial animus and more. At the same time, the internet has been a force multiplier for terrorism. Individuals have such easy access to content online that can radicalize them, and importantly, such easy access to information on tactics, techniques, and targets, which means that they can plot their attacks more quickly and make their attacks more effective. What that really means is we need a whole new model for counterterrorism in this country that includes law enforcement, but also includes members of the public.
We'll be listening if there are any answers at this Worldwide Threats briefing later this week that Senator Warner will help oversee. Jonny, on what is happening, we already had the Gaza situation having raised the global threat picture. Now, around the world, Americans are being warned to be very careful. How do you understand what Sam is talking about here at home? I mean, what about Americans overseas?
Well, there's no doubt that the threats are increasing. I'm a little bit dubious that the Iranian regime right now can reach out and touch us in the homeland. Certainly people who are still in the Gulf are vulnerable. And I think that on the back end of this, the intelligence community and our federal law enforcement are going to have to be very focused and well-resourced. given what we saw after the Soleimani strike, which was that the Iranians engaged in lethal operations around the world trying to kill American officials or former officials. So we can expect that, I think, on the back end of this.
So, I mean, it's still making people really nervous, Sam. I mean, even just in New York, you had the 2 Pennsylvania men, 2 U.S. citizens who were arrested. They were going to protest the anti-Muslim protest in New York, but they claimed that they had ties to ISIS. It's not clearly directed by a state. It's not clearly directed by anyone.
Inspired.
Inspired. How do you protect yourself?
Well, what we have to think about today is not just how to enhance physical security protections at targets. Certainly, the government has a role to play in helping synagogues, churches, mosques, schools, and others in putting up security barriers, training security officers, and those physical security enhancements. We also really have to double down on information and intelligence sharing. That's a government function, but it also has to include the public. And what I mean by that is the threat landscape is so dispersed. There's so many tentacles of this that when individuals and communities see an individual that may be exhibiting signs of violence, they have to ask for help from law enforcement, from a social worker, from a mental health worker, because the pathway and the path to radicalization and mobilization is just so rapid. And I do think, Johnny, that the Iranian regime has demonstrated an incredible capacity to be flexible and adaptive. They've played a long game here. They have invested in propaganda and tools in this country, as well as just hiring people to do their dirty work for them to such an extent that I am concerned that they have the intent and the capability to, if not direct attacks here in the homeland, to inspire them.
I'm with you 100% on that, Sam. While I'm not a spokesman for the U.S. government, I would add, though, that our intelligence community has been very focused on that threat in recent years, as well as federal law enforcement.
So, Kevin, we heard from one of the president's advisors. He's got a broad array of them, David Sachs. He's not a national security guy, he's the tech guy, but he had an opinion and he went public with it. And he said the U.S. is a much more powerful country than Iran, but they have a dead man's switch over the economic fate of the Gulf states and beyond that. There seems to be pressure to end this sooner rather than later. Is there a time frame on these projections you're looking at in terms of the pain threshold for oil and gas for Americans?
Yeah. Margaret, Iran's asymmetric control over the Strait is a pretty powerful tool, and we're seeing that right now for all these producers who require that seaborne access to their markets. They're shutting in supply right now so that they don't overflow their own storage. What that means is that the inventories that are forward positioned in the world are going to be exhausted. The strategic reserves that are coming to the rescue will be used, but we're looking at weeks before things start to get very tight. Already in Asian economies, you're seeing refiners cutting their runs. You're seeing export controls so that products that are refined in those economies aren't going to global markets. We're very insulated here in the United States. We're a net exporter. The world itself uses 36% less oil per dollar of real GDP than it did 25 years ago. But we're talking about 3 to 4% of the energy that supplies global consumption going offline. We're going to feel that.
Was there any justification to make up for the fact that America is helping put money in Vladimir Putin's pocket by lifting these Russia sanctions? Is that going to make a dent in the oil price?
I think one way to think about it, Margaret, is that both the strategic reserve draw and the Russia sanctions relief are tools that are available to the U.S. government right now. The price might be higher without them.
But we can't quantify it, really.
It's hard to prove a negative.
But is it just to show they're doing something?
Well, there is a certain, every person in public office tries to show responsiveness in crises like this.
Fair.
The problem is that as the price rises, interventions become more significant. Sometimes the best thing is to do nothing and let the market work it out, but no one gets elected to office on that basis.
Fair point. Johnny, the U.S. intel assessments say Iran's government is not at risk of collapsing. You've been thinking about Iran for a while. What do you think of this new supreme leader who we haven't seen out in public?
Well, Mojtaba Khamenei is clearly not a charming public face. What he is a systems operator. So he was a gatekeeper for the Supreme Leader's office in the past. He has strong ties to the IRGC and the Basij. He knows how power actually operates. And he is effectively a symbol of continuity right now. And I think that's more important than being an actual, in an actual managerial role. He is the message from the regime that they are still in control.
Mm-hmm. And the stability of that regime.
The stability of the regime and the command and control over the asymmetric capabilities that Iran has, to include, for example, proxies that may seek to do Americans harm. sleeper cells in the United States, and more. So as we do think about the new supreme leader, I'm thinking about, from a homeland perspective, whether that individual has a command and control over the tools that could, in fact, harm Americans, Margaret.
And these are open questions we're going to try to get answers to. Thank you to all of you. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.